Peace, y'all. Welcome back to another segment of Juneteenth the Genealogy. We have a special guest, Fatou. So, we're here at Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, and we are here to have a good time to know about genealogy.
Yes.
All right. So, Fatou.
Yes.
Who are you?
That's a good question. So yes, like he said, my name is Fatou. So I am born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. My family is so I have roots in Detroit, but then I also have roots in the South, and then I'm also half Senegalese because my dad is from Senegal. So all of those things make up who I am and the family that I come from. But then more generally, day to day, I'm an adjunct professor at Howard University in the School of Communications. I work with sophomores and juniors in the Annenberg Honors Program on a communications topic that they get to write a thesis on. And then I also work full-time for Breakwater Strategy. It's a communications and research agency based kind of in DC, but we're fully remote. So that's my day to day that I do.
Okay. All right. So our next question is, what is genealogy?
So to me, I would say I define genealogy as the study of really researching family history, but that it doesn't have to be your family history per se. I think it's, researching, if you want to research King and his family or Malcolm X and his family. So really just getting a better understanding of people's family dynamics, the people that they come from, the cultures that they come from, the places that they come from, all that good stuff. So genealogy can include things like music, it can include food, dialect, right? So like how people say we have a slang in Detroit, I think that other people have slang in other places as well. But then even further point, things like African-American vernacular English, like that's also a part of genealogy because a lot of those things came from when we were over in Africa getting, it got dispersed all over the world. So that kind of summarizes to me what genealogy is.
Okay, cool. All right. So Fatou, how did you get into genealogy?
Great question. So my mom is really, really into photos and just family history. I would say she definitely took a liking to it more in the past about 5 or 6 years. But in general, if you ever wanted to see like an old family photo of someone in our family, we have all the photos. So she grew up, or not grew up, but as an adult, she's been teaching. She just retired recently. But basically, I'd say that she's a full-time photographer because that's her passion. So over the years, I've been able to see photos of my family members dating back to like the early 1900s. So like literally probably like 1906, 1907, and from both sides of the family, right? Because when my mom was with my dad, he gave her a lot of the photos, so she's just kept a lot of stuff from both sides. So that's kind of how I got into it, technically through my mom. And then I started interviewing older Black elders like last year. And so that's been an interesting, kind of personal project. Just really trying to understand all the wisdom that we can gain from them and also understand what their path was like back in the day in the United States, right? Because people sometimes automatically think like, oh, you're from Georgia, and you grew up there in the 1920s, it was racist, when everybody didn't all have, certain experiences. So that's in a nutshell how I kind of got into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Fatou, can you tell us a little about your family genealogy and your mom's or dad's side, however you feel, want to express?
Yes. Of course, I'll talk about both. So I might have to look at my notes a little bit for this.
You good.
But in total, I grew up with me and my 3 older sisters. So my mom has 4 girls. My sisters' names are Aminata, Fatima, but we call her Mam Jar, and then Noge. So we're all named after technically our aunts on our dad's side because my mom is really into African culture. She's very Afrocentric, and she got with a Senegalese man, so there you go. So also something interesting though, on my dad's side of the family, the women don't remove their last name. They keep their last name, right? So basically let's say for example, my dad's mother, so my grandmother, her name is Aminata Al, but my grandfather's name is Setting and Bake So. So the wife keeps the name, but then all the kids get the father's last name. So my dad's last name is, his name is Mustafa So. I have his sister, Daba, her name is Daba So. So when I get married, technically I should keep my last name and then just give my husband's last name to my kids. So just a little fun fact. So yeah, I have 3 older sisters by my mom, and then my dad has 8 kids in total. So he had 4 kids in Senegal, 4 in America. It's 7 girls and 1 boy. Real big fun family. My mom has like 3 older siblings. So her mother had 4 kids, or 3 kids with 1 man, and then her father, my mom's dad, had, I'm thinking about, it was like 4 of them. So I kind of always consider my mom like the middle child because she doesn't have any fully blooded siblings, but they're all my aunts and uncles nonetheless. Now my father's side is where it's a little interesting because Senegal is a mostly Muslim country, so you know there's a lot of polygamy going on. So my father, I think he said his mother had 8 kids in total. His father had about 22 kids. And then his grandparents, I think in total, is at least over 10 in total together. So yeah, it can get a little tricky on that side when you try and start thinking about everybody because, you know, again, people have different kids with different partners, or my grandfather, I think, was married to like 2 women at the same time. So things like that can happen as well. So I always like to call myself like a little blended because I got my African-American / Detroit / you know, Southern roots on one side, but then my dad is Senegalese. So on my mom's side, her parents are from Midway, well technically Mount Andrew, Alabama, then Midway, Alabama, and Montgomery, Alabama. And then my father, his entire family is from Mbaké, Senegal. Mbaké is like a very small town near Touba, which is the holy city in Senegal. So in a nutshell, that's my family.
Okay, so on your mother's side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this goes into like genealogy with the Great Migration.
Yes.
So
yes.
who migrated to Detroit in that whole like story? Even if you feel like telling the story behind why your people migrated.
Yeah.
You know, speak on that.
Absolutely. So my grandmother, like I said, is from Mount Andrew. I've actually never been there before. Don't know where it is, but I don't think it's far from like Midway. So then she was born there. Then she grew up in Midway, and I think a couple, really like most Black people, needed to find work. So she moved to Detroit, and then that's when she had her first set of kids with, you know, the man that's not my grandfather, and then had my mother. My grandfather, on the other hand, was in the Navy, and he really should have been in the Navy because he was really young. Like, I have a photo of him. He looks like he was probably like 16, so I'm sure he lied about his age, but he is from, like I said, Montgomery, Alabama. When he got enlisted into the Navy, he moved to California, and then I know he was in World War II. He also lived in Washington State, and I think my mom said he lived in Ohio State at one point, and then he moved to Detroit finally. So they both met each other on the east side of Detroit. So the house that my mom and her siblings grew up in, me and my sisters grew up in too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and your grandmother and grandfather that's from Alabama, are their parents from Alabama as well?
I want to say yes. Okay. I'm pretty sure they are. I have to double check with my mom, but I think they're from Alabama too.
Well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know my mom told me that, I want to say my grandmother's parents were farmers because that's what she found when she looked it up on Ancestry and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on your dad's side, what does genealogy look like for them? You know what I'm saying? Like, because like for the African American, it's like, you know, going through Ancestry.com and trying to find all these census papers. But what does it look like? Is it more oral history?
That's a good question. So I think as my mom has been finding more stuff, she actually has been finding some documents online. So I know online, but also connecting with my dad's family. So, for example, my cousin Adama, my first cousin, I want to say, if not her, then my mom may have found it online. My mom was able to access my grandmother's birth certificate. So some of these things are online, but also I know like in certain areas, just in certain parts of the world in general, everyone, like a lot of people don't know how old they are, or like they never had a birth certificate, or, you know, you weren't born in a hospital, you had a midwife, like you might not know much about your age. So it's always funny because like I said, when you're in a more polygamous society, you know, I'm not going to say things get blurred, but I just know, for example, if you might meet someone, right, they'll be like, oh, that's your aunt. And it's like, no, it's not my aunt. That's my stepmom technically. But just out of respect, you just say, oh, okay, aunt, whoever, right? So genealogy on that side is very interesting. And I think it's a little more complicated because they speak Wolof. So natively, we just grew up speaking English. We didn't learn Wolof. We didn't learn French. I happened to take Wolof at Howard when I got here in 2015. Took it all my 4 years. And then I learned French in my master's program. So or learned it some more. So all that to say, it can get a little difficult because when I want to start interviewing family members over there, but they don't speak English. So I'll basically just have to have like a translator in the family who does, and just go from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. So, in terms of your genealogy research,
yes.
What is the most interesting find?
Okay, most interesting find, like in my family. That's
or story.
Okay, I want to think about this for a second. So, I would say that one thing that I've noticed about my family is the level of, I would say, work ethic that everyone has. And that's on both sides of the family, like my mom's side and my dad's side. So when I just think about the stories that either my mom has told me or that I've interviewed and had with people, like, we have a good amount of business owners in the family. My great aunt used to actually open up a store on the east side of Detroit, and everybody in the family worked there. So my mom used to tell us all the time when they was kids, like, everybody would go to Aunt like the store, everybody worked in there, like, just everybody was in there. So I thought that was kind of interesting, because it's like, look back at photos, right? I didn't grow up going to family reunions. So when I'm seeing these photos of my family that is from Detroit go down south and do that migration every year for a family reunion, it just kind of sparks these ideas in your head, like, well, what did these people do? Who were they? Another interesting find, there are a lot of men in my family who have served, in America specifically. So I have like late cousins. I'm pretty sure I have like great uncles as well. My grandfather, like I said, he served. And my late cousin, who I just interviewed, he turned 100 this year before he passed away. I interviewed him when he was 98 going on 99. He was in the Vietnam War, if I'm not mistaken. If he wasn't in the Vietnam War, he was in World War II. But I have a lot of war vets in my family, so that's another interesting find. And then one more final interesting find is my cousin Kenny. My late cousin Kenny was one of the first black firefighters in Detroit, Michigan, and he also had the chance or opportunity to walk with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when they came to Detroit in the 1960s. So if you look very closely at one photo, it's a particular shot they got. I could see Kenny right in the photo. So those are a couple cool finds.
Yeah. So what's really sticking out to me is the Detroit side.
Yeah.
So can you give like a little I guess experience or like explanation of like Detroit culture in terms of like connection to like Southern culture? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, cause a lot of people from Detroit come from the South.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
what is it like? You know
yeah, it's always funny because when I got to Howard, everyone's like, "You sound like you from the South."
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not from the South. I'm actually a city girl from Detroit. But it's funny because anytime I describe Detroit culture, I feel like I always say, we have a grit-like culture. A lot of people in Detroit work very, very hard. Sometimes they work too hard and don't always reap the benefits, but we have a very work-hard city. But we're like, I don't know how to explain it. It's not gritty in a like dirty way. It's almost like grit, so we're well polished and we like to work hard, right? But we're also a lot of hospitality going around. So, when I used to grow up walking down the street, you say hi to somebody when you walk down the street. You know what I'm saying? You don't just walk by and go on about your day. So when I got to DC and I was saying hi to people and they were ignoring me, I was like, oh, y'all kind of rude. But yeah, so we definitely have that Southern hospitality type of feel and vibe. I think also because Motown was founded in Detroit, when you think about some of the people that have come through the city and some of the artists, even if they're not from Detroit, we just have such a huge blend of like culture and a richness to it that I think I call, and I will still say this today, Detroit is one of the blackest cities to me because when I was growing up, everybody was black. My friends were all black pretty much. I did, of course, have, white teachers here and there, but the principal was black. My hairdresser is black. My cheer coach is black. Like the doctor, the dentist, everyone. So I think for me, even just that transition from Detroit to Howard, it wasn't that much of a cultural shock beyond like, oh, okay, there's black people that speak Spanish. There's black people that speak French, or like they might be from Nigeria. They might be, or I'm meeting people of color from like Nepal, right? So I was just exposed to more black and of color cultures. But in general, like I was just like, yeah, I grew up around black people. Like this is just kind of normal for me. So I would say grit like hardworking, and we're a little flashy. So I know people always talk about like we be wearing furs in the wintertime, and you know Cartier is a huge brand out there. So I think we like to just be well put together, and you know keep it nice, keep it cute.
Yeah. All right, cool. So can you talk more about the Griot Collective?
Yes, I can. Okay, thank you for bringing that up because I was going on this tangent. So before I actually launched Griot, I was getting these, or no, this was when I launched it. Yes, I launched it at some point last year. So it was Black History Month, and me and my mom and my oldest sister, Minita, were planning a trip to go to Alabama to interview my cousin that I spoke about earlier. So basically, with that trip, I also was like, well, I want to do more stuff. I want to do stuff with my students. I want to do stuff on the personal side. I just want to do a host of things. So that month in February last year, I took my students to the Library of Congress. We went on like a research tour, and we also went to the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center because I wanted them to get, you know, just a better understanding of how they can research things in general, like even beyond genealogy. But the one thing that really sparked everything was an interview that I decided to have. So I have a good friend of mine who graduated with me from Howard, Brian Lewin. He is he's a designer. He's also a tailor. He does custom fitted outfits. I have another friend, Shaq, who has a brand called E Pluribus Unum, EPU. He is from New York, and then Brian Lewin's from Maryland, and then Madison Starr. So Madison Starr, I believe she's from New York as well, and her mother is actually Nisa Hilton. So I wanted to interview all of them because I realized every single thing that they do or they're passionate about, their parents did or people in their family did. So I was like, I think I should just do like an Instagram live, you know, ask them a couple questions, of course, do my research and just kind of pull out why they wanted to do the things that they did. So, you know, Madison Starr, her mother is a design. She designed for a lot of different celebrities just in the New York area and broader, like in the United States. So she is an artist at the moment, and she's a designer, and she is, I think, trained to be a doula or trying to become a doula. Shaq, fashion designer, literally his family, carpenters from Jamaica. So like, you know, already good at woodworking, creating things, making clothes. And then Brian Lewin is well, his family is from Jamaica originally, but came to Maryland, and all of them, same, woodworkers, artisans. And so I just think it says something when you know who your family is and you know what they do, and when you decide to live out that passion as well. Because I think something that I realized over the past year, a lot of people don't know who they are, so they don't know what they want to do. They don't know where they come from, so they don't know the things and the possibilities they could be exposed to. So even when I think about my family, my grandmother, my mom's mom, worked in school. My mom is a teacher. My sister's a teacher. It's not that big of a surprise that I'm, a professor. Like, it literally kind of runs in the blood. So I think just being able to find out those types of connections, or, my dad is technically Fulani. So Fulani is like this big term. It's a one type of like ethnicity, but there are other groups under Fulani. So specifically, my dad is Pular. But Fulani people in general are nomadic. So again, it's no coincidence that we love to travel. Me and my sisters literally get up and go places all the time. My father does the same. So I think when you start learning more about your culture and your history and your family, you really just start to understand a little bit more about yourself. So Griot has taken off. I've done more interviews. I think I've interviewed over 5 90-year-old Black elders. And I just want to keep that going. I want to turn it eventually into a larger documentary. And then it's getting me more ideas too about, how can I creatively write about the people that have come into, or that came before me, right? My ancestors and people that I got the opportunity to have these stories with. So yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
So what tips would you give somebody getting into genealogy?
So the first thing I would do is just start asking questions. So something that I noticed when I talk to older people is that, like, for example, when I talked to Kenny, right, and I interviewed him, he was like, I haven't told my children some of this stuff, right? So people just don't, like, I think people sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So, like, if you want to know, like, well, hey, where was grandma born, or where is she from? What's her name? Like, I think it's good to ask those type of questions, and then do your own like online research. Ancestry, my mom has the premium account, so she can get access to more information, but there's tons of places, and just research libraries that people can look into. Actually, when we went to Alabama, we saw, I think it was in Montgomery, they have an Epps co-host research library in a museum that we were in. So my mom wanted to do some more digging, just to figure out what specific towns her grandparents came from. So that's one piece of advice I'll give. I would also say be mindful of, you can be mindful of the questions you ask, but it's in the context of what you know, right? So like a lot of family history is very triggering for some people. So when you ask a certain question, you just want to make sure you're doing it respectfully. And, if sometimes though as well, that can bring out things that can maybe connect you more with your family. So I would just say like be cognizant of the type of questions you're tailoring. And then the last thing I would say is beyond wanting to know your own genealogy, just explore more cultures. So I tell everybody my favorite streaming platform is Canopy with a K. I probably, before I even did griot and all this stuff, I'm pretty sure my interest came from when I was a minor in African studies at Howard. So that's what I actually didn't talk about. My major was legal communications, minor was African studies, and then I went to Johns Hopkins and got a master's. There I studied international relations, economics, and African studies. So the African studies element that I studied at Howard, I think was really important for me as an individual because it exposed me to different parts and cultures of Africa that I wouldn't have thought about, and how do those things relate to pop culture, contemporary politics, like the way we talk about family or like family dynamics. So I actually been on Canopy like every day this week just watching stuff. But yeah, just explore other cultures because I think it's interesting to be able to connect the dots with not just Black American culture, but maybe Jamaican or, El Salvadorian, like wherever. There's so many different things that we are similar in how we do things. So I think it's important to just, not just learn about yourself, learn about everybody.
Okay, all right, good. Appreciate it, Fatou,
yes,
for the interview.
Course.
And we can find you where?
Oh, that's a great question. You can find me on Instagram. I'm going to have y'all follow the Griot page. So it's AGRIOT, Griot Collective on Instagram. And yeah, I'm available however y'all want to hit me up.
All right, thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.
All right.